Hey guys, welcome back to the podcast. I'm on episode 34 of the Noel Casler podcast. I'm back here with my main man, Jumpin' Jimmy Kennedy, to break down the week's events and talk about whatever the heck we want to talk about. And we appreciate you guys listening. You got some loyal listeners out there. Jimmy, they said hi to you last time I did a show, and I'm hoping to meet some more of them. In about 3 weeks here at the finest theater in Norwalk, the Wall Street Theater, which is in downtown Norwalk, Connecticut. It's a beautiful theater. It's a beautiful time of year. It's going to be a great night. It's a Thursday night, November 18th. I'm looking forward to the show. I'm working really hard on the show right now. I always try to think of every show as like, it's like a play to me. You know, that's kind of how I prepare, because I went to drama school, so that's my background, so yeah. I write it and rewrite it. And I also leave a lot of room to sort of improvise and deal with what's going on in the moment. And, that's where your strength usually comes from. You got to, as Oprah would say, or somebody said it, anything I don't know who said, I just say Oprah said it. But you got to leave room for God to walk through the room. Do you know what I'm saying? You could over rehearse stuff, and you got to always be open to the moment, and on stage, I've often made the mistake, especially in stand-up, because when you're starting out, it's like, oh, it's so hard. And, you just don't ever deviate. Don't try a new joke at the beginning. Other comics will give you all these like rules to live by and fill you with fear. And you listen to them, and then you realize, you know what, there's probably something funnier I can say right now. And sometimes you'll be like, I'm not going to say that because it's not in the script. So that's a long way of saying I don't always stick to the script. I certainly don't stick to the script on this podcast. That's not what it's about. It's about a freewheeling conversation, and we welcome you guys to jump in too. If there's things you want me to talk about or you want Jimmy to talk about, hit us up in the DMs and let us know, and we'll address it. Any questions or anything, because there's a lot out there to decipher, But with that being said, let's get into it this week. How you doing, first of all, Jimmy? You did your own podcast yesterday?
Yeah, I'm doing really good, man. Talked with a college buddy of mine, Braylon Morgan, who currently works at CBS 4 and Fox 59, two affiliates here in Indy, as a master control guy. You need those folks to keep the station running. But he also works as a model on the side. Very handsome guy. Good to have somebody with a face for TV on the show for a change this week, but really cool to talk with him. He's one of the most authentic guys I know. He came out as bi in college and talked about that experience. And, coming out as bi in Indiana is different than other places, because he had to navigate the culture that we have here in the state. But one of the strongest and most talented guys I know. So if you go to jbkonair.com, you can listen to the episode.
Well, that sounds good. And he's an African-American gentleman too, right?
Yes, sir. Yeah. So, he had to navigate that whole thing of trying to identify himself, and where we went to school, UIndy, it's, about 90% white. So he was the minority among the majority, which was primarily white. And, you have to navigate that, unfortunately, especially in the Midwest. But we had a good education, and he's bound for success. I'm sure of that.
It looks like it. And that's why I mentioned it. Yeah. I wouldn't mention it otherwise, but so he's a black guy who came out as, bisexual. Like, that's just like God gave him all the courage. You know what I mean? And that's in Indiana is the point. And that's not an easy thing to do in Harlem.
No.
And to do it in Indiana, where people are, kind of against you anyway. I'm not saying that to indict Indiana. We just know it's kind of a hotbed of racism and KKK and all the bad stuff, as is much of America. I'm not saying that to be funny. Like, you can look it up. KKK, is a hotbed of support in Indiana. And, we're in a country that's moving backwards. That's what's so pathetic, is that this stuff shouldn't even be an issue anymore, and it felt like for so long, at least in the issue of gay rights, LGBTQ rights, we'd moved, leaps and bounds. I grew up with a mom who was closeted, who didn't come out until I was in my teens. So I grew up around, lots of gay men and lesbian women at a time where you had to hide in the shadows. Right. We would go out to San Francisco in the summer, and her friends were all in the Castro district, which, this is the era of Harvey Milk and stuff. And they'd go up into like Marin County on the weekends and have these parties. We'd go up and like stay at this guy, had a big house up there. And even then, even in the 70s, San Francisco, where you had an openly gay mayor, Harvey Milk, who was assassinated, or he wasn't, I don't know if he was the mayor,
an elected official.
Right. He might have been the mayor. We don't have a fact checker, guys, and I hate making mistakes because I'm going to hear about it, but I don't have the ability to fact check in real time. But Harvey Milk was, a leading figure and a civil servant who was murdered by some bigot. And that was at the time the most openly free city for gay men and women in the country. And it was still difficult. So you thought, at least during the Obama years and gay marriage and all this stuff and equality being passed, that it was the one issue we were moving past, and the fact that like bigotry, homophobia, bullying, racism, all these things became the coin of the realm for the right wing Americans now is just disgusting. And I'm going to try to not get in a rant this week. It's hard not to, there's a lot of bad news. Some people, a guy I know passed away, I heard right before this show, Peter Scolari. He was a wonderful actor. I knew him personally for about the last 15 or 16 years. He helped me out a lot in my life. And whenever I didn't know him super well, but whenever I saw him, he'd be like, "Hey, Noel, how are you?" Like just such an enthusiastic, cool guy, brilliant actor, great stage actor, great comedic actor. He was before your time, Jimmy. He was on a show called Bosom Buddies, which is what made Tom Hanks famous.
Yeah.
It was a really great show. And then, Alec Baldwin is somebody I've also known for a long time. And, he was involved in a tragic incident yesterday in New Mexico filming a movie. And a brilliant cinematographer had her life taken from her because they were using a prop gun that had a bullet in it. And it hit her and killed her and hit the director. And, that's probably going to be the topic of a lot of debate. And it sucks, it's a tragedy. So I send my thoughts and prayers to those people. I'll hold my comments. I wish every film didn't have like gunplay in it. Like I almost wish we moved past like having violence in so many movies, but if guns are going to be used, and this is a Western, so you're going to have a gun in it. But like every movie has guns. It's crazy. Like this is now the third time we've had one of these issues. There was, Brandon Lee, and there was a guy named Eric in the 80s who was killed like playing Russian roulette with a prop gun. It's dangerous stuff, but maybe someday we can look past like why are we also so attracted to violence? Like why does every show now have to have this horrific violence in it? Some of them don't, but so much of it does, and that's a different topic. Eckhart Tolle talks about that stuff. It's like your pain body watches that. Like a really healthy human doesn't want to see really graphic, like recreations of violence. It hurts you. Even if you think you doesn't, it hurts your psyche. I was watching this great movie the other night, or I thought it was pretty good it was about a mobster and Meyer Lansky, who invented like Vegas. He was the guy who kind of made gambling a massive thing. And he actually had a son who had cerebral palsy, and he was loyal to his son his whole life. And that's a pretty strong characterization in the movie too. So it was this great drama. Obviously it's the mobster guys, so that, his partner was Bugsy Siegel, who was a notorious murderer in the mob. So you're gonna have violence, right, to tell this story, but you can tell it without actually showing the person getting shot in the head, and all the gore and stuff. And for some reason that just like is such a part of everything now, because special effects can do it so well. And I think people kid themselves and be like, well, we're showing the reality of violence, so we're not sugarcoating it. Like, no, you're not. It's just like porn. It's like violence porn. You know what I mean? And like, it's a way to sell it to a streaming network. Half the reason Game of Thrones was so popular was all this sexualized violence that was on the show. And it's just, I wish, there's other things to look at. Why do we just have to have so many fucking bullets in our movies when we're in a culture that has mass shootings all the time? There's one in San Diego last night, didn't even make the news. And anyway, so my thoughts and prayers to all those people. Peter was a guy who, just a really helpful guy. He lived on the west side. I think he would come over to the east side, and I would see him at this place where I see people, that are trying to better their lives. And he was always somebody who was going to stick out his hand and offer his help. And that's what we need to do. We need to be a culture that that helps people now, and as this news broke of this horrible incident in New Mexico, obviously there probably isn't a bigger figurehead of liberalism, an enemy of the right on Twitter than Alec Baldwin. Like, they just hate him more than anybody else. And oftentimes he can be his own worst enemy in certain, things. I've known Alec for a while, and I admire him greatly in many ways. He's a guy who's always doing something. Like, he'll be doing a community play out in like the Hamptons at the same time he's doing a film, at the same time he's having his 8th baby with his second wife, who's a 30-year-old yoga teacher who's pretending to be Spanish. Like, he gets in stuff where you're like, I cannot believe this. But he's a wildly entertaining guy, who's like everyone else. He's got his flaws and stuff, but it's a tragic situation. And this guy, JD Vance, who's like a poor man's Rick Bragg. I don't think you probably know who Rick Bragg is, but he was a great writer. Yeah, he's a wonderful writer. He used to write for the New York Times and fell into his own kind of controversy. Now he's down in New Orleans. But he wrote a book called All Over But the Shouting, which is one of the great memoirs about growing up poor in the South. It's a wonderful book. It came out about 20 years ago. And JD Vance is a guy who basically ripped that off and wrote a book called Hillbilly Elegy. And they made a Netflix movie out of it with some A-list actresses and Ron Howard directing it. Like, you couldn't get a better pedigree. And now makes his whole thing about attacking Hollywood and liberals. And he went to Yale Law School and clerked for like Kavanaugh. And the guy's pretending to be some rube, and is like hanging out at the Yale Club in New York City. But now he's in Ohio and he's running for Congress there. And he's like, he's got a beard. So like the other day, masculinity is good, and he's this paunchy guy. He couldn't get through a freaking Zumba class or whatever. You know what I mean? And it's part of what we're always talking about. Like, toxic masculinity has become a branding thing. You can't buy toughness. That's the illusion they're selling these guys. If you could just be a man by growing a beard, right? Like, right. Everybody would be a man. Growing a beard doesn't make you a man. Buying a big pickup truck to look tough doesn't make you a man. Being a man is helping out others that are less fortunate than you. It's showing some vulnerability. It's taking care of your community and your family. It's keeping your mouth shut when somebody else is suffering, even if they're on the other side of the political divide. But this JD Vance guy tweets out like, let Trump back on Twitter so we can see some, Alec Baldwin tweets. That's what he said on Twitter today, because he wants, because Trump has got no class and would be Alec is like his like arch rival, not just because of the impression, because they know each other. Alec knows Trump's number. They're from the same world. So that kind of trolling is what the Republican Party does now. Let's just be mean and spiteful. And he was doing that tweet to sort of get Trump's attention, right? Hoping somebody will show the boss the tweet. And JD Peckerwood, as I call him, is defending him, right? And it's just being a jerk, because that's going to appeal to your base. And that's a really tragic thing, that's where we're at. Marjorie Taylor Greene went and tried to hector Liz Cheney on the floor of the Senate yesterday after the January 6th commission hearing, and Jamie Raskin, and tried to pick a fight with them. And was like, when are you going to investigate BLM and stuff? And Liz Cheney was basically like, shut up, bitch. Don't you have space lasers to worry about? Stopped her, Yeah. But, and as I've said all the time, she's unwell. That is not going to end well. The Marjorie Taylor Greene thing will not end well. She will be in a court someday facing criminal charges, and she will claim mental unfitness. I guarantee you. She will have a lawyer representing her someday that will say she was flipped. Her mental problems were exacerbated by MAGA and Trump, and she's innocent of bombing the Capitol or whatever the hell she did. And I still say she bombed the Capitol, and that's for the FBI to decide. But it's bad news. It's crazy. Like, we have an insane bunch of, oh, look, you got your t-shirt on. An insane bunch of people that are criminally insane, basically running around with positions of government.
And the thing that worries me, I know that there's security measures taken. I have a family member who was part of the Secret Service and is still actively training newer agents. Okay. But people like Marjorie Taylor Greene make me worry about the State of the Union and Louis Gohmert bringing a gun. You don't need members of Congress that shouldn't even be on your radar, having to worry about members of Congress carrying weapons into a place of government, but that's the kind of precautions we're having to take. And the Republicans have shown repeatedly they're not for this infrastructure bill. And we've said before, they're going more and more toward, an authoritarian party, and that's where they are. But what are they for? Are they for anything? That would be my question to the MAGA folks. They're not for anything besides the continuing of the chaos. And that's, you would think at some point they would wake up to that. I don't know.
Well, they are for something, Jimmy. The guys that do the legislating don't write legislation, right? Jim Jordan has never wrote legislation. They're there to be disruptors, but they're there for the tax cuts, right? They're there for the Coke industries and your Mercers and all your other people who want to do business as usual and don't want the majority of white America to figure out they're getting played by their corporate masters. So they're there to sort of be a distraction. They're there to walk into a store and fall down on the floor and start flopping around with foam coming out of their mouth. So everybody runs over and goes, look, they're having a seizure, while the real robbers go behind the counter and empty out the register, right? That's what Trumpism is, okay? Trump's a big clown for a reason, so you're not looking at what's behind Trump and who's really making the money, right? So that's what they're there for. It's just not legislating as we've come to know it. That's gone out of the window. And you're correct in saying that. Mitch McConnell, these guys don't pass laws anymore. They just obstruct stuff. They prevent judges from getting on the bench. And then when they get a little opening, they put some more corrupt guys on the bench. Neil Gorsuch, his high school yearbook photo came out the other day. He was quoting Henry Kissinger about breaking the law. These guys, you couldn't get a more deplorable group of men than Kavanaugh, J.D. Vance, who I said earlier clerked for him. It's just like those dweeby neo-Nazi schmucks you went to high school with. What was the Catholic school in Ohio, since outside of Cincinnati?
St. X?
No, the one that got all in trouble for making fun of the Native American guy and stuff.
Oh, I don't recall.
Covington High School. It's like Covington High School graduated into the United States Congress now. That's where we're at. These entitled schmucky dudes. And I grew up around some of these guys. I know what these guys are like. There's the New England bred version of them that sort of wear Nantucket Vines pants and nice sweaters and go to the golf course and use politer terms. But they'll support people like Trump, and they'll support these sort of conservative policies because they know, granddaddy's trust fund is getting passed down to dad and it's going to be his someday. And they don't want to pay capital gains taxes on it, right? So they're willing to live in an unfair world because it's skewed in their favor. And that's why people like AOC terrify them. That's why they're afraid of the future. Imagine living in fear, Jimmy. You're afraid of what tomorrow may bring because tomorrow may bring equality. Tomorrow,
right? Yeah.
Tomorrow they might get educated in Texas and find out we stole this state from the Mexicans and wanted slavery so bad we wrote it into the charter the day we declared our independence. Okay. Texas is the most racist state of all of them. And that's saying something. Okay. Because Mississippi and Alabama and all these other states exist. But Texas has always been militant, in their white supremacy, as I discussed last week, and they're fighting tooth and nail to keep the truth from being taught. Teach it. That's the only way we get over it. We think you're going to get away with it. That's the past and we can move on. We can't move on until we make good on our failures. A business that doesn't take an inventory and kids itself about the value of unsaleable goods is not a healthy business. Right? Mm-hmm. You do an inventory when you're running a business every year because you want to find out what's in the warehouse. What's gone bad, what's out of date, what is just, you can't keep writing that stuff off and thinking it's of value because it's not. You have to throw it out and deal with it. And we have to sort of do that with our history. We have to make amends to the people we've wronged. We can't just go on because it's not an equal playing field anymore. And now, more than ever, they're going in the opposite direction. And they're hoping that the J.D. Vances, Brett Kavanaugh, and all these other guys will let them get away with it. And sadly, this week, they got another victory, right? They blocked the voting rights bill. They blocked it. So now gerrymandering still exists. You'll still get little cartoon Dan Crenshaw, with his cosplay and his eye patch, pretending like he's a hero, like helping people die in Texas during the pandemic, hiding under his desk when the attacks come. That guy's not a fucking hero. I don't care if he was in a Navy SEAL. I'm not impressed. That's the other thing. Everyone gets so impressed about I'm not impressed. So what? So what? I don't care if you served. What, you went to another country and killed a bunch of Muslims because a dickhead who owned an oil company told you to do it? I'm not saying that for all veterans. A lot of those are good kids that do it. Guys who end up in the elite forces often benefit because of white supremacy within the military. They don't give those same opportunities to African-American troops and minority troops. They keep it like an old boys network. Oh, you're an elite because you get better grades and stuff. And yeah, sure, they haze you for a week and you learn how to swim with a knife in your mouth and stuff. But so what? Doesn't make you a member of Congress when you're going to make these cartoon ads and jump out of airplanes and pretend to own the libs and stuff. Because a guy like that wouldn't get elected on the merits. He wouldn't get elected without a gerrymandered district and a bunch of this same cosplay I'm talking about. So what they do is they say, hey, where do all the white people live with pickup trucks? Oh, they live around here, here, and here. So they draw a map and say, this is where all those guys are. If we have this guy run and say, he's a vet, he's got a flag, he's got a gun, they'll vote for him. Mm-hmm. And that's the whole strategy. That's how you got Jim Jordan. Guys allowed child molestation to happen on his watch. He's not going to get elected without a gerrymandered district. And now that's completely legal. And in Wisconsin, they went where, which a real battleground state these days. It's going to be something like 20% of the white folks in Wisconsin are going to determine who they send to Congress now through their gerrymandering. Like, it's insane. And you can't vote out inequality, right? A lot of people just like, well, just show up and vote, blue wave. You can't vote it out. Like, when the House runs the game, the House always wins. Okay. That's the mob thing. That's Meyer Lansky. It's like the casino always wins. The House always wins. That's the GOP philosophy now. We're going to control the voting maps and the districts. So we're always going to win. And even if we lose in these rare cases, now we control the state senators and the secretaries of state, right? And they're just going to throw out results now. And that's what's going to be happening. We saw just a little bit, a harbinger of what's to come in this last election, in this mess that was 2020. The next election is going to be a nightmare, Jimmy. You're going to be crying. You're going to be weeping watching the results on your TV there in Indianapolis in a year and a half.
Well, we're dealing with a situation. You and I both have empathy. So it hurts when progress isn't made, when we know it can be made, but there's forces outside of it that people just don't understand. But I think what makes me really frustrated about the current GOP is it's just an indifference to learning and wanting to grow as a human being. And I'm sorry to say, white folks, but part of growing and part of growing up as a human being is going through some pain, going through some adversity. The aversion to pain that white people have, primarily the people that would vote for Trump, it's remarkable. And it's why they vote for such a weak man, because they see themselves in his weakness, so it's time to grow up. It's time to move on from this shit. We're better than this. We just need to choose to do it.
I know, but it's, we need a whole re-education. We're not the generation that's going to see the change, Jimmy. You don't get that stink out of the fabric that easy. You're going to have to wring it out over several generations, because it's like a cultural re-education we need on both sides.
Yeah.
It's not just like everyone's a good guy, the shades of gray and everything. And a lot of it is the culture we consume. Alabama, Kay Ivey, the governor, was bragging about how CRT is never going to be taught there. She made it a law. That same state made yoga illegal. Teaching yoga in schools for 20 years. They just allowed it because they're like, that's Hinduism. That's against our Christian values. It's yoga. You couldn't do anything better for your body than yoga. And I'm not proselytizing for yoga here. I practiced yoga for 12 years, changed my life. I haven't been to class in a year and a half since the pandemic. I do yoga moves every day on my mats and stuff. I got yoga mats everywhere in my house. Anywhere you walk, there's a yoga mat within 10 feet and a guitar, right? Because I need them both, to sort of align myself. But yoga was never going to hurt the kids of Alabama. Mountain Dew was going to hurt the kids of Alabama. Guns in daddy's closet were going to hurt them.
Right.
Poverty was going to hurt them. right?
Well,
Racism was going to hurt them. I'll let you speak in a second. Sorry. Like, but yoga wasn't going to hurt them, and that's the kind of thing we need to teach. It's like prisons. We need to go into prisons and like teach yoga and bring therapy animals in there and heal these people. We just executed another mentally challenged guy yesterday. That's two people that were like technically had the brain capacity of a child that our government has killed in the last like 2 weeks. You know what I'm saying? That's not a Christian nation, and I'm not excusing their crimes, but like, this is insane. We've become numb to the suffering around us, and it's like you said, we don't have empathy. And what were you going to say, Jimmy?
If you're somebody that needs a religion on a daily basis, however much you need it and it benefits you, I'm not talking to you, okay, when I say this, but like, you've talked about the difference between love and attachment, right? And the importance of distinguishing those. I think a lot of folks that are currently Christians in this country are attached to their Christianity. They're attached to the images that are embedded in the Republican Party. That's what makes it so scary, right? It's nationalism and religion. My point is, we need to detach ourselves from religion and just look at it as a different point of view. We've become attached to our customs. That's what I'm saying. And that the more we can just open our mind to different ideas, the better it's going to be. I know that's kind of a general idea, but I've seen the attachment be ridiculous with religion, especially.
Well, that's what makes people take up arms in the name of their religion. There's a difference between religion and spirituality, Jimmy. Okay. Right. Religion is dogma that's been handed down to you, usually by men trying to control other women, right? Like even the Catholic religion, like women didn't have equal rights. Christianity, like, we fought, like they had like purges in the name of Christianity. You know what I mean? They killed people, like crusades where they would just murder you because you're a heathen. We have wars fought all over Europe because of Christianity. Look at Ireland, Protestants and Catholics and stuff. And that's religion. Like you said, you get attached to it and it becomes this dogma. That's different than spirituality. Like when you get sober, they tell you you got to get rid of your self-will will not make you stop drinking or using a substance, right? Like I can't stop drinking on my own as much as I want to. And I'll be like, this is really bad for me. If I take a drink, I'm going to keep drinking that. I'm going to keep getting drunk, right? Until my life becomes really, really bad and unmanageable. And when you decide you want help for that, you treat it with a spiritual approach. And what that means, Jimmy, is it means you pick a higher power, and it could be anything. It could be your cat, right? It can be the room you're sitting in with other people that are seeking help, right? It can be a piece of cornbread. It doesn't matter what it is, okay? But it's not religion. And people trip up on that real often when they come into AA and stuff. They think like, well, I was raised Catholic and I don't know about that God stuff. Forget about God, okay? Like forget about God. All those religions essentially were saying the same thing and pointing towards the truth. It got co-opted by men that have and women that have a desire to sort of like control people. And forget about that. Throw that out the window and just think about something beyond you. It could be a sunset. It could be one of those bugs we're talking about every week, a praying mantis and stuff. How can you look outside at nature and not be convinced of a higher plane, of like some kind of wisdom beyond yourself that makes all this stuff work, that makes those coincidences happen in your life where something comes about, at just the right time, when the butterfly shows up at your dad's memorial. It when you feel it in your heart, when you're in the presence of truth and love. And ultimately, that's what spirituality is. It's love. And when you sort of surrender to that, it gives you a strength. And don't let anybody tell you they know the way. Find it yourself. Look within. That's what people need to do, is look within themselves, because the answers are there in your own heart. But people get real tripped up on religion. It's a bad word, and it should never be involved in government. Separation of church and state was for a reason, okay? And you won't get a more heathenistic, unreligious person than Donald Trump, right? So how he became, the poster boy for the modern Christian movement, which drives me nuts anyway, because these guys will go to church on Sunday, consider themselves God-fearing in their all-white church, racist as hell, get out, go eat a ham, right? On Sunday dinner that was like a pig grown in a factory farm that was tortured its whole life. You really think Jesus would be into that? I don't. I think Jesus would be a vegetarian if he was walking around right now. He'd be like, y'all motherfuckers are crazy. That's not what I meant. You know what I mean? Like, yeah. But we don't look, capitalism is the true religion of America anyway. Religion is a business. All these like fundamentalists and stuff, they're making money. Joel Osteen or whatever the hell his name is, lives in a 70,000 square foot house or 17,000 square foot home, drives a Ferrari. If your preacher drives a Ferrari, find a new church. Trust me, because anybody who truly understands the nature of spirituality does not want a Ferrari. Okay. When you know you could sell that and feed 4 dozen families for a year, you're not driving that car around. You'll get a used Subaru or something. Like, so anybody who's like prosperity, when prosperity gets tied up in this sort of sense of worship, it's a Ponzi scheme. Okay. It's no longer a religion, and people are susceptible to it because it's delivered through the mechanisms of television and now the internet. It's delivered through the drugs that we've already used to zone out. Somebody who's sitting in a field all day looking at butterflies isn't going to be susceptible to that shit. But somebody who's watching CSI all night, you know, and all this other crap and lulled into this sort of hypnotized state. And then on Sunday, a guy comes on, is like, you unhappy with your life? Do you feel like you deserve more? Send us $20 and I'll send you this book and things will get better. Those are the marks. And that's what Trump saw. He saw the marks in American society because he'd already been exploiting them for 40 years. That's what his casinos were. He sent buses to Kentucky and Ohio and all these states, got senior citizens to get on these buses, take a fucking 10-hour ride to Atlantic City and put their Social Security checks in his slot machines. And then he sent them home broke and did it again at the end of the month. You know, like that's what that guy's based on. So he knew when Obama got elected, a lot of this country is going to be mad for no other fact than he's brilliant, accomplished, has a beautiful family, he's well educated, and now he has the most powerful job in the world. And there's a big segment of this country that thinks he doesn't deserve that because he's not white. And I'm white and I never got out of Salt Lick, Indiana. You know, and how does this fancy guy with this African name get to be president? And I'm sitting here like changing somebody's fucking tires in the cold. Right? So Trump knew how to fuel that resentment. He knew that there was like cities where industries had moved out long ago because Reagan gave them a free pass. And we decided that boardrooms were more important than families. Republicans killed this country. They killed the middle class. And then Democrats come and rebuild it. You know, under Clinton, there was no deficit. We had a surplus of money. That's how good Clinton was. The 90s were so prosperous, dude. You could get a job walking down the street in New York City. There was so many jobs, and Bush got into office within a year and a half. We had a massive deficit again, and we were fighting 2 wars. Why? Because the guy who was really calling shots was Dick Cheney, right? And he represented Halliburton and KBR, Kellogg Brown Root, a company that makes money off of military services and is tied to the petro-industrial industry, oil and gas. Right? And where were we fighting those wars? There was other bad shit going on in the world at the same time. We didn't go into Bosnia. Do you know what I'm saying? We were in Iraq that had nothing to do with 9/11. Nothing. Not a thing. Right? But we went there, and guys like little Dan Crenshaw suited up and pretend to be heroes and come home and I'm a patriot. The whole thing's a mess. It's a fucking scam. And I'm not dissing on people who do service. I get it. And usually it's usually lower income people who join the service. Let's be honest. It's a way out of your town. It's a way to get some skills. You know what I mean? It's honorable. I'm not saying it's dishonorable, but the ones that exploit it for their own political benefit when they come home, that's dishonorable. Because no soldier ever fought for the kind of things that Trump stood for. From my great uncle who stormed the beach at Omaha to my 2 grandfathers who served in World War II in intelligence, they didn't do that for a guy like Trump to hand it over to Russian oligarchs.
My grandfather, he had 5 kids by the time he was 30 years old, married his wife before they were 20, and they went to Fort Hood. He was in the military at Fort Hood. He hated it because they break you as a man. You know, they get in your face, and he didn't like drill sergeants. And afterwards, he went to work for the Teamsters because he wanted to work for the little guy and provide jobs. He ended up being the treasurer of Local 135 here in Indianapolis. Pretty big job because of all the, 465 and all the interconnecting highways that go through here. He had to be kind of a union rep for a lot of people. So I've never been a military guy in my family, but it stopped being about freedom a long time ago. That's for damn sure.
Yeah, and we need military. There's nobody's questioning that, but like it's a scam. I just hate when it's exploited. We don't have to rehash it. Trump dodged a draft 5 fucking times. You know what I mean? He punched his son in the face and said he would disown him when Don Jr. said he was going to join the Marines. He punched him in the face actually when he didn't have a tie on to go to a basketball or a baseball game, but they don't serve. You know what I mean? His grandfather got kicked out of Bavaria because he was afraid to serve in the army. That's why he came to the United States. They tried to sneak back to Germany and they wouldn't let him. They said, no, you're done. So
see, that should be a deal breaker. That should be a deal breaker right there as POTUS. Like, you have family history like that, you're done. There should be some kind of exemption within the Constitution that, like, if you find that kind of behavior against the United States or whatever, you're done.
Absolutely. Look, if you can't show your records, if you're not showing your tax returns, you're not renting an apartment in New York City. But now he gets to be president. You couldn't buy a car being like, you know what I mean? You couldn't drive a car off the lot showing the amount of documentation he didn't show and became president. And this is why it can't ever happen again. But now's the time to legislate against this stuff. Now's the time to move. And as a lot of people are saying, we're not doing it fast enough, and thankfully there was some movement this week. Deripaska got his big mansion raided next to Kellyanne Conway and George Conway and, those grifters, like living next door to a Russian billionaire. At one point, Oleg Deripaska was the wealthiest man in Russia. He owned a company called Rusal, which is Russian aluminum company, right? One of the main oligarchs, like the oligarch. You're freaking Tom Brady of oligarchs, right? And he started buying American politicians a long time ago. He owns Mitch McConnell. He owns Rand Paul. Those were the 2 guys who got the sanctions lifted at the behest of the White House, after sanctions were put in place when Obama found out Russia was interfering in our election, right? They put all these sanctions on him. And in 2016, and then a couple of years ago, Stephen Mnuchin goes up to Capitol Hill and says, hey, we need to lift these sanctions. This guy's a good guy. He's going to build these factories in Kentucky and stuff, these oil, aluminum plants. Lift the sanctions and we'll keep an eye on them. That's like Trump's going to have a beauty pageant, with a bunch of teenage girls. And don't worry, it's all under Donald Trump's watchful eye. What could go wrong? It's the same thing. But luckily, my point is, like, that dude got raided. And that means they had some information. They had more than a warrant. They had something they had to talk to the attorney general about. And it probably ties in with some stuff they learned from Tom Barrack, who you'll remember got arrested too, or somebody, Lev Parnas, somebody's talking. And I guarantee you Trump is nervous, and even more than Trump, Jared and Ivanka are definitely nervous because they're knee deep in all this stuff too. So hopefully the noose is tightening a little bit and they're squirming, but it's also running out the clock. Right? It's like a sports game. They get to that, the Republicans had a win this week with knocking down the voting rights bill, not even letting it be debated. It wasn't even like they voted against it, Jimmy. It couldn't even go to cloture. Like, it couldn't even be debated. We're not even going to talk about voting rights, right? So they don't even try to pretend anymore. But so that's a victory for them. If nothing else big happens and we sort of like skate into the midterms, if they were held tomorrow, they'd probably take back more seats than we would be comfortable with. And at that point, it's kind of all over because they're just going to be like starting to try and impeach Biden and, make Trump king and every kind of batshit crazy thing you can think of. I'll shut up in a second about the political stuff, but the one point I want to make that I warn people about is like, you see how much damage Marjorie Taylor Greene and Lauren Boebert and Jim Jordan and these guys are doing. Imagine another 30 of them, right? Look at that lady in
red
Arizona.
Dress?
No, the lady. Yeah. Let's talk about the red. I know you liked her, Jimmy. I sent you that video.
Well, I tweeted about it before.
Tig old bitties. That's what we call that.
Oh God, get away from me, man. No.
Oh, you didn't like that, Jimmy?
No, God, she needs to drive a Ford F-150 to move around. I don't need that. No, you kidding me? I'm not hopping up in her Ford F-150.
I
But
hear that, man. Yeah, it's idiocy. But the even scarier one is there's a woman in Arizona who's running, I think, for governor or something in Arizona. And maybe it's I don't know what I don't, I'm ignorant to her seat. She's got like the stripper name, like Carrie Lake, or like weather person, newscaster. And she talks just like that Megyn Kelly girl. Like she's got this polished way of speaking, newscasters speak. And then she's just saying that, like, no, Biden didn't win. He didn't get 84 million votes. And she's saying this stuff with a straight face and calm, cool, measured tones that'll be very effective. Saying that kind of propaganda and disinformation in a sort of calm, measured voice plays really well on Fox News and OAN. And it makes the people sitting at home watching it think it's real. It's the opposite tactic of a Matt Gaetz or a Jim Jordan that just speaks really fast and tries to say a bunch of bullshit. And thankfully, Jamie Raskin was just, who was a constitutional scholar. He taught constitutional law for decades. He was a law professor. He's just knocking them down. But it doesn't matter. They say a bunch of fast words real quick. That's sort of the strategy, of the new fascistic right? It's like Ben Shapiro and all these guys who just talk really fast,
He's a little dweeb. I don't like Ben Shapiro, but I'm getting kind of exhausted by the process of this whole thing. Like the fact that we even had to vote on Steve Bannon being in contempt, and I guess I just want your thoughts on, if you're Biden and you're trying to get this agenda passed, how do you overcome politicians being bought, or do you just have to work within the system and get what you can?
Unfortunately, he's just sort of has to work within the system, and he's doing it, but we see the results of that. The bill is already gutted, right? The Build Back Better plan is already now the child tax credit is down to 1 year. It was going to be in perpetuity, right? Now it's just a year. And that was one of the most significant pieces of sort of social legislation that we've had in my lifetime. That was going to make lives better for children that didn't have much. And I was one of those kids, and my friends were. I know the difference that would have made. And it's good they got it for a year, and they'll have to fight for it down the road. But we've already allowed two people, Cinnamon, whatever the fuck, Lady Footlocker, and Joe Manchin, right?
Yeah.
To already gut that. They've gutted all the environmental protections. Cinema's not going to be happy with any bill that includes rescinding the corporate tax break. Why does this Kirsten Sinema from Arizona get to be the champion of Trump's tax cuts and corporations? It's so obvious to people, or to me, it seems anybody, what a scam this whole thing is, and Don Winslow made a great video about Manchin, right? And all of his children, and just what a scam that is, West Virginia is just a scam. If you're from a state that's poor and you're that rich and you've been there that long in government, something's wrong. Where's the money going? You're embezzling it, essentially. These guys are embezzlers. And Kirsten Sinema, whatever the hell her name is, she saw she can make a quick buck. She doesn't care about getting reelected. She's going to be a millionaire when she gets out of there, and she'll be on Fox News. It'll be like Wacky Saturdays with Kirsten Sinema. They can all move up now because there's such an infrastructure of right-wing media that welcomes all these people. It's a golden parachute like we've never seen. Trump just got all this extra money from this scam financial instrument that some guy in Florida invented. And that's how he's getting all this money to start his new social media platform. It's just insane. It's like the new Dogecoin or all this Bitcoin. There's so many unkosher things happening in the world right now. It really is overwhelming, Jimmy.
Well, the thing that I saw during the pandemic and up until 6 months ago, it was all the folks doing the Mary Kay sales. Right. That's all pyramid schemes and stuff, trying to sell materials like that. But I looked up because OAN was talking about Biden's going back to Delaware again. He's traveling back to home, and it's Trump spent $141 million playing golf during his 4 years. You know, if Biden wants to go home every weekend to Delaware, we can take him there. Okay. Like, we spent more money on Trump playing golf and cheating at golf than we should have spent, you know, doing something else. We could have put that money towards something else.
Right. Do you know how close Delaware is to Washington, D.C., Jimmy?
How close is it?
It's like an hour and a half.
Yeah, it's not even that far.
Right. It's not, you know, he used to go home every night on a train from Capitol Hill.
Yeah.
Okay. When his wife was killed in a car accident and he had to raise his sons alone, a single father dealing with grief. He had to leave Capitol Hill every night, get on a train and go back to Delaware. It's a commutable distance. Okay. And he's just going back there to get away for the weekend. Trump was stealing money from US taxpayers and putting it in his Secret Service, not to mention, you know, and overcharging and overtaxing the Secret Service in terms of work, and then just stealing taxpayer dollars because they'd have to rent hotel rooms. He would fly to Mar-a-Lago on Air Force One. You know how much jet fuel, you know, that uses? Do you know what the carbon footprint to put Trump, his fat ass? Melania would barely go. She'd be seeing Hank up in New York City. So she'd have her own detail going up there to get a little, you know, get her some on the weekends. Trump would go down there to get the Trumpettes. You know, it's the only reason Trump needed to be in his clubs, because he wants to do side deals with no microphones and cameras around, right? He wants little Lindsey Graham to get in the golf course so he can remind him what he's got to do next. He wants to just like switch to the cocaine on the weekend down there in Miami. Adderall will get you through the day, right? But cocaine will get you off. That's his party time drug, right? You know, Don Jr. was walking around with an 8-ball in his pocket for 4 freaking years in Secret Service protection, and he had no consequences. You don't think the Secret Service guys knew he was coked out of his mind? Do you know what I'm saying? We were paying for that. We were paying for Tiffany Trump to go shopping on Worth Drive in Palm Beach. I worked on Celebrity Apprentice taking care of the Trump family, Jimmy. I didn't even know there was a Tiffany Trump until the election. Okay. She wasn't allowed anywhere near Celebrity Apprentice because she was fugly, right? In Trump's words, she was ugly. Same with Eric. Like, he barely saw Eric on that thing. He barely taught. He hates Don Jr. You know, I don't want to go off on him, but it's just, they're all scammers. They've always been scammers. The people that work for them are scammers. You know, some of them are getting on the other side of the scam now, but like anybody who's like, oh, I want to work for Donald Trump. And people think I didn't work for Donald Trump. Okay. I worked for the production. I worked in TV production, like a million other shows that happen on the 3 networks that I would get hired to go do live events for. And that's the only reason I ended up there. I would never consciously be like, oh, I want to work for Donald Trump. You know, even the beauty pageants, it's a production coordinator hires you, right? Not the freaking family. But anyway, it's all a scam. Let's talk about something else, Jimmy. You're watching the Jimmy's never listened to or watched Secession, folks.
Yeah, I'm getting into that a little bit. I'm in the middle of several shows right now. I'm right in the middle of ER. I like that show a lot. I was a big fan of the first 5 seasons, which George Clooney is on, because George Clooney's the man. But I like Secession a lot. The shorter brother that's kind of funny, I like him. Yeah. I don't have the names down yet, but
his name's Kieran Culkin. He's Macaulay Culkin's little brother.
Now I can see the resemblance.
Yeah.
I get that, but it's beautifully shot. I like the cinematography, really interesting shots, and great actors. You know, good cast, well cast show.
Wonderful actors, man. Great. Yeah. The best show on television by far. You know, it's fantastic.
And the 3rd season just premiered last week, I think.
I know, and it was incredible. It was so good. I won't give any spoilers to our listeners, but it's a great show. And so that's cool. Yeah, you like George Clooney, huh?
I'm a big George Clooney fan, yeah.
Yeah, I'm going to tell some George Clooney stories then. George is a great guy, and I got to work on George organized a big benefit for Haiti after this horrible earthquake they had in 2010, and we did a big benefit. I think on both LA and New York. I worked on the New York side, and we had like Sting and the Roots and like all these, you know, great bands performing, and we raised a lot of money. But the first time I ever met George Clooney, I was standing in a green room at Radio City Music Hall. It might have been the Grammys or something like that. And we had this green room down in the lobby, which was unusual to have one. Anybody who's listening and knows Radio City, there's a lot of room backstage, but like we did it in the front of the house, like downstairs in the lobby. behind this pipe and drape kind of situation. And I'm standing there with George Clooney and Tommy Hilfiger. And in those days, Madonna used to have a woman that would walk in front of her and she'd be like, Madonna's coming through. Turn your head and don't look at her. Like really mean. Madonna, like I've worked with Madonna a bunch. You got to like bring her up in a private elevator and you don't let anyone else near her. It's one of those Tom Cruise type things, you know, like look him in the eye, just bullshit. Right. And I know people love Madonna. I'm not dissing on Madonna. That's how she rolls. Okay. She's in the pain in the ass. Right. So anyway, I'm standing there and this lady comes through like Madonna's coming through. Turn your head and don't look at her. Right. And like George Clooney looks at me and kind of raises his eyebrows, you know? And I said, dude, well, if you can't look at her, I sure can't look at her, you know? And he goes, dude, let's eyeball her. And he comes down to my height. Right. And she walks by and we just like stare at her as she goes by. And then we're like high-fiving each other, you know? And that's how he is. He's a cool guy. You know, he's the biggest movie star in the world and can take a joke. Do you know what I'm saying? He's a natural prankster, you know, and he's just a real guy. He grew up in Kentucky, like, right? He grew up poor. He had to work. He was selling like typewriters door to door or something, vacuum cleaners or something, you know, and he was around forever until he was in ER and got his big break. He was on a show that was supposed to take place in Peekskill, which is near me, but it was a show, I think it was called Facts of Life. And he was like a regular guy on Facts of Life in the 80s when I was watching the show, when I was a kid, Jimmy. So, you know, he's a guy who knows how lucky he is and he uses his platform. And there's probably nobody that scares Jim Jordan more than George Clooney, because he's going to come out with a documentary about what went down there in Ohio. Yeah. And man, that's going to be the end of Jim Jordan. I'm surprised he's not already hightailing it out of there.
Well, and I'll tell you, man, the NBA tipped off the other night, and boy, I hope LeBron runs for Congress or something, because he had a great black suit on for the opening night, man. Looked like Bruce Wayne, and that was kind of his caption, you know, LeBron Wayne or whatever he said.
That's funny. Yeah, you sent me that pic. LeBron's my favorite athlete. I mean, he's such a good guy, you know, and he just does things. I've talked about it on this show before. I started crying when I was sitting in Cleveland one time next to my hotel. I was staying at the Ritz Carlton, and this is where you stay when you're in Cleveland, right? You stay there too, right, Jimmy?
I do. Yeah.
Yeah. So you stay at the Ritz. There's only like two places to stay in Cleveland. Like when you go there with a band, you stay at the Ritz or you stay at this other hotel when you're doing like Rock and Roll Hall of Fame things. And I was there for the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, some kind of thing. And there's like a Hard Rock cafe next door. And I went down, I was like reading the newspaper and eating like whatever you eat in a Hard Rock cafe, right? Like some horrible thing, a burger or something, you know, and something I shouldn't have been eating. And I'm not eating now. But anyway, when you're on the road, that's the other thing, Jimmy. You try to be a vegan and a vegetarian and you tour in America, and it's really hard to eat healthy because America doesn't eat that healthy. There's hip kind of like places in every town. You know, there's sort of the crunchy, like alternative, you know, cool side of town everywhere. That's not where you stay when you're on tour with a band. Okay. You stay in the center of town. You usually stay where like all the office buildings are, and they're usually closed, right? Because you're usually there on a weekend or something, right? So you're always in like, you know, you have no choices to eat. And so you end up eating in a tilted quilt or something like that. Kilt, you know, like they have theme, like misogynistic theme restaurants in America. And anyway, you eat in one of these places, it's hard to eat healthy. So as long as I was a vegetarian and vegan, like I would slip up on the road. Anyway, that's not my point, but I'm sitting there reading this article about, I think I've told this story before on the show, about his foundation, you know, and he's trying to get kids to improve in school. And he would have all these like incentives, you know, he'd give you a bike and then he'd give you like time at a summer camp, like a vacation and stuff. And the beautiful thing that he realized is he would include the kids' parents too, right? So your mom got to go too, because he understood the strength of the family. It wasn't just like this old attitude of like, you know, we're going to go into the hood, so to speak, and help out the kids, you know, and take the kids out of there and leave the parents behind. He's treating the whole patient as it will. And I'm not saying these folks are patients. I'm just saying it in a holistic sense. He's trying to improve and enrich his community in a way that's like sharing the wealth and helping, you know, mothers and sons and daughters and fathers build memories together. You know, that's the reward. You're not just going to get a new shiny bike. You're going to make your mom happy too, right? You're going to give your mom a vacation. You're going to get out of there and get, some fresh air and hang out with your mom for a week. Like when I read that he was that spiritually connected, that he understood it to that level, I started crying, like right there reading the article, because I was like, this guy is the bomb. Like he gets it, and he's a natural leader. Obviously, he's one of the greatest athletes you'll ever see. My favorite basketball player. I'm not into sports. I ain't even going to pretend, even though I did all that all-star game and all that shit. I don't know anything about sports, but I know that guy's the real deal.
No, he's absolutely fantastic. And anybody who's lucky enough to get the opportunity to go to the I Promise school and they graduate, they get an opportunity to go to the University of Akron free of cost. Their parents, when they're in the surrounding community, they get access to job training. Like LeBron understands at this point, we need problem solving at a holistic level, as you said before. And he understands too, he had a high school education. He didn't have college basketball or a college coach to guide him. Michael Jordan had Dean Smith and Phil Jackson, two of the best coaches in the history of basketball. LeBron, not so much. He's pretty much kind of handled the organization wherever he plays, and he's kicked the Pacers' ass the last decade. So he'll continue to do so into year 20. He's into year 19 this year. So
he's been in 19 years.
2003, man, that was his opening year. So it's crazy to because I've been playing video games for that long. You look at the graphics from 2003 to 2021 to see the transformation of LeBron from a kid to a grown adult. Now it's kind of cool. We got to see him grow up a little bit.
Yeah. Well, he's definitely a grown ass man now,
Yeah.
King
37.
James. Oh, good for him, man. More power to him. I can't wait to see what's next, what the second act is for a guy like that. So good. We need more LeBron Jameses, and we need more for every horrible person that we talk about on this show. There's a lot of good people. The good people aren't on the spotlight because they do it kind of with humility. LeBron's in a game, where he's on the court of an arena. So obviously he's in the spotlight, but I guarantee you, he knows a bunch of heroes in Akron and, that are helping out in ways that, we don't get to talk about. And those are the real heroes. Those are the people that make a difference, and so shout out to all those folks. You know who you are. If any of you listen, and I know some of you do, because some of you guys came up to me after the last show and you said, I'm a teacher. And I said, you're the hero then. That's let me take a picture with you. So, that's who we want to honor. And I'm doing another show, November 18th, Wall Street Theater in Norwalk, Connecticut is going to be lit. Come on out. Tell a friend, please. It's going to be a really good show. It's a Thursday night, November 18th. We'd love to see you there. I'll also be in New York City at the Iridium on December 22nd, which is a phenomenal jazz club. Oh, I still got to tell that story about Slash and the cigarette. I'll tell it next time because we've been on for a while, Jimmy. Keep them hanging on. But that's when we get closer to the date, I'll tell that story. Remind me,
We'll keep teasing it in the meantime.
Yeah, exactly. And Les Paul, I got to meet Les Paul. He was a wonderful guy. And I'll tell the story of the auction of Black Beauty, his original Les Paul that he built too, like the prototype Les Paul. I was there. Oh, I told that story. Jim Irsay is the guy who ended up buying it. Now he's sitting there and when they were bidding on it and stuff. So I'll tell that story again too. But anyway, that's it, folks. That's episode 34 of the Noel Casler podcast. And Jimmy's got his own podcast. He told you about the top of the show. He's about to hit you with the deets right now. Again, take it, Jimmy.
jbkonair.com. You can get the podcast anywhere that you get your podcast. Just search my initials, JBKONAIR, and you'll find it.
Thanks, guys. And thanks for listening again. Thanks all you guys who came out. Hit me up. If you're listening to this and you came to the show in Rams Head, let me know because I loved meeting you. There were so many people there. It was hard to connect with everybody, but thank you all. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next week. Be well and be safe. We love you. Peace.